Hello and welcome. My name is Brendan and I am the Customer Success Engineer in the US for Cloudi-Fi. Today we are going to be going over the Cloudi-Fi Captive Portal API integration with Zscaler, as well as authentication options and their functions and user access. Firstly, I want to explain how captive portals function. Devices connecting to wired or wireless internet are always looking for a captive portal. The way that they do this is by sending an HTTP request. Each vendor has their own HTTP URL that they use to detect captive portals. For example, Apple products send requests to captive.apple.com. In this example, we see a customer site that is connected to Zscaler ZIA using an IPsec or GRE tunnel with their guest traffic forwarded over the tunnel. The Zscaler tenant has Cloudi-Fi embedded using our API framework, allowing for redirect to the captive portal, as well as utilizing Cloudi-Fi as the identity provider. Now that we have the basics covered for communication, let's go over the steps on how the product works. In this example, I'm going to be acting as a visitor using an iPhone. A visitor device first connects to the network either via an access point or via a wired connection. This device then sends an HTTP request to captive.apple.com directly over the tunnel to ZIA. Zscaler recognizes the request, then redirects the user to Cloudi-Fi for authentication. At the captive portal, the user will then authenticate with whatever method is provided for them. Once authentication occurs, Cloudi-Fi sends sample messages to Zscaler, informing them that the user is now authenticated, which prompts Zscaler to send the user to a success page of the company's choice. Now that we have gone over how the redirect and authentication occurs, let's go over some commonly used authentication methods with the test portal I have created. The first option in this captive portal is corporate access. This is predominantly used by companies who have an existing SAML IDP, such as Okta, Ping Identity, Azure Entra, etc. To enable this method, an admin of the Cloudi-Fi tenant will first need to set up the SAML parameters in the Cloudi-Fi admin console. Within our knowledge base, we have many articles outlining the steps required to enable this authentication. In this captive portal example, I have this corporate access button set up to use Ping Identity. The user will first click on corporate access, accept the terms and conditions, which will then redirect the user into that SAML provider's environment where they can log in, MFA if required, and then they will be sent to a success page. Next, we have event registration. Events are quite common for a lot of organizations, and getting a burst of people on guest wireless is a struggle for most environments that require complex verification. Within the Cloudi-Fi admin console, there is a specific section for events. In this section, we create a new event. We add a name, a PIN code, when the event will start, when it will end, and then finally we will select which locations will be hosting this event. The unique portion of this event option is that this event method will not even appear in the captive portal until the timer starts based on the start time entered in on the admin console. In this example, the users will enter in their first name, last name, email address, and PIN, which will then redirect them to a success page once they've accepted terms and conditions and register. Next, we have email registration, where a user will enter in the information requested, accept terms and conditions, then click Sign Up. Now, it can end here with an assumption of positive intent without additional verification, but there's also an option to have users receive an email with credentials where they will come back to the captive portal and use the Login with your credentials option at the bottom. Next, we have SMS registration, which once filled out, sends an SMS one-time code where the user can autofill or enter the code in manually to receive access. Lastly, there is a sponsorship method, which allows a visitor to request access from a sponsor within the company. At the bottom, you see the sponsor's email, which will need to match a whitelisted domain for sponsorship in order for the sponsor to receive the permission email. If everything matches correctly, the sponsor will receive an email asking for access, where they will click Accept, bringing the sponsor to another page, asking which profile to be assigned to the user. This is where our API integration with Zscaler becomes more interesting. On the Cloudi-Fi side, we utilize profiles to identify users based on what method they use for authentication. These profiles match up with Zscaler departments, allowing admins to customize the experience based on how a user authenticates. For example, someone who registers with corporate access will be assigned a BYOD profile, giving them 30 days of guest access without seeing another captive portal. Someone registering with SMS can be assigned a guest profile, giving them 24 hours of guest access, and so on. These profiles not only tailor the session duration, but can also be used for URL destination filtering, network protocol access, and any other Zscaler permissions that can be tailored to specific departments. This was a brief overview of the Cloudi-Fi Zscaler API integration. For more detailed questions and use cases, please reach out to our sales and marketing team for a live demo. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.